So when thinking about content infrastructure, we want to have a plan, and we actually haven't done anything yet. We haven't actually built anything yet. It's just talking about that and maybe drawing that out. And what we want to get to is the ability to define the content that's most important to your organization. What is the content that you want to have as part of that content infrastructure? Let's start digging into the definition part of that. So we can look at kinds of content. So it could be things like employee bios, articles and blog posts are one that are almost always the example. And then, okay, once we have articles and blog posts, how can we do tagging of that? How can we do categorization of that? How can we set up regions to maybe segment that content? So we can define the content itself, but then we can start segmenting it into pieces. And I think drawing that out in a map, maybe use some kind of flowcharting software, something like that, or just even listing it out, even in bullet points, is really, really useful as an operation within your organization. Sometimes before you even start thinking about the content platform that you want to use, it's like, what is the content that you want to use is a really, really important thing to kind of dig into. Because then once we know the kinds of content, we can break down, okay, well, what makes up each one of those things? What are the fields and attributes that an employee bio needs to have? Do we want to have a headshot as a part of the bio? Do we want to have a full, background of their work history, things like that? Like you can dig deeply into these kind of content types to put in those fields. And then we can think of what type of content is in each field. Is it a number? Is it a piece of text? And for sure, like as we're outlining these two, I think there's a ton of questions that you might have. Feel free to ask those in the chat about how to do this. This is a much deeper process for sort of doing content modeling, but this is what is in a content model. Essentially, we define the kinds of content and we split it into fields, and then lastly, we relate it to each other. So there's no point having a list of blog posts and a list of categories that are completely independent of each other. A blog post, I need to be able to choose that category on there. So there's a relationship, a one-to-many relationship between the blog post and the category. And then I might have a different relationship for my tags or audiences, things like that. And this can get quite complex to do this. And pretty much anything that you can come up with, you're going to have relationships that come from that. And I think that this is one of the most exciting pieces of working with a customer, John, is where you can sit down for the first time and start talking this through.
Yeah, I think the relationships is super, super powerful, because that's where you get to reuse content in multiple areas and not recreate the wheel. That's the whole point of a great content architecture, is that you're reusing things, you're making it easier to use. I know that one thing that we will probably be launching later this year, or this quarter, I should say, well, along with this type of content around content architecture, is a template for these to look at these things. We used to do, or we still do, content architecture for customers. We used to do it for partners, and we would have a template that we come through and we break down. Okay, what are the types of contents, and then what are those fields, and even as deep into there, I was like, what's the validation, and how do you reuse this? And, do we need to put restrictions on images or have an auto thumbnail? There's lots of little things you start to ask as you start to draw it out. And even the relationships. Oh, where can we reuse this and things like that? So we have a pretty helpful template. If anyone's interested in that, throw that in the chat window. We can get that out and publish that with some of the content that's coming.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of this with customers in a Visio diagram. We've started using Figma. We've done it in Word documents. We've done it in Excel documents, lots of different formats for doing this. Certainly, this is a great thing to document first, because you can spend a lot of time plugging things into a system when it's not quite right and everyone hasn't had their say. This is about let everyone have their say, let everyone kind of feel what's important to them and make sure that they get heard in putting that on paper.